There's a lot of questions that we have for Ambassador Rice, and there are many layers to the onion. There's all kinds of questions that have been raised. All these questions need to be answered.
Do you still think there's unanswered questions?
About 50 unanswered questions.
About 50. John McCain is a man with many, many questions. John McCain is a man with many questions, and he is a man in desperate need of some answers to those questions. Or at least he just likes to say that over and over again on television. There is a strange thing about all of Senator McCain's questions, though. The answers to his questions appear to be readily available, known to everybody in the country who cares about this matter, except for John McCain. Here's what I mean. Yesterday, Senator McCain went on Fox News, naturally, to continue to advance his theory of a massive White House cover-up of the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. Senator McCain has been advancing this cover-up theory for weeks now, demanding answers. But he appears to just be tuning out those answers that he's demanding when they are, in fact, provided to him. It is getting weirder and weirder over time. Here, watch.
Who changed the talking points that was used by Ambassador Rice?
That is a question, Senator McCain, that we have the answer to. The intelligence agencies acknowledged last week that they were the ones who changed the talking points, Senator McCain. You know that. And we know you know that because you even put out a statement about it when it happened. That question is answered. But he still has questions.
Who changed the talking points that was used by Ambassador Rice, and why, and on what circumstances?
Another question to which everybody already has the answer. As we learned again last week, the talking points originally linked the attack to al-Qaeda, but when the document was sent to the rest of the intelligence community for review, a decision was made to change al-Qaeda to extremists for intelligence reasons and for legal reasons. You say you want an answer? That one has been answered in public. Everybody knows. Also, more questions.
Why was references to al-Qaeda left out?
Sir, we've known the answer to this one for nearly 2 whole weeks now. Quote, a reason the references to al-Qaeda were deleted was that the information came from classified sources and the links were tenuous. I mean, this is strange, right? I mean, John McCain going on national television constantly as the point man for this supposed mass cover-up. And he does not appear to be familiar with even the basic details of the story that have been made public. Even the basic details of the story that he's alleging was covered up. Senator McCain outdid even himself, though, yesterday when he offered this as his latest piece of smoking gun evidence that something is definitely rotten here.
We knew within hours of all the details when we got bin Laden in the raid there. Every bit of one of them. They're making a movie out of it. Now here we are 10 weeks later, and finally our ambassador of the United Nations, who appeared on every national Sunday show, has now said that she gave false information concerning how this tragedy happened.
Okay, think about this for a second. He's saying, we knew all the details of the bin Laden raid right away. Why would it take 10 weeks to figure out all of the details of the Benghazi raid? Just think about this just for a second. The bin Laden raid, for the record, was our raid. We planned it. America planned it. We knew all the details of it right away because it was our idea. America carried it out. The attack on the consulate in Benghazi was not us. Unless, of course, that's the next part of your giant cover-up conspiracy. Why? Different things, right? Done by different people? There's obviously something else going on here, right? I mean, the purported concern here, what we are supposed to believe about this whole Benghazi scandal, the purported concern is, I'm sorry for the language, but it is getting stupider and stupider by the day, to the point of being a really special kind of stupid by now. And I will just say that on the other side of this, my personal cockamamie conspiracy theory about this is seeming less and less comparatively implausible. I mean, last night on this show, we talked about the other thing that may be at the root of this current campaign, this weird fact-free campaign against UN Ambassador Susan Rice. Ambassador Rice is one of 2 candidates reportedly on the shortlist to become the next Secretary of State after Hillary Clinton. The other candidate on that shortlist besides her is Massachusetts Senator John Kerry. And if somehow Susan Rice is disqualified from becoming Secretary of State and President Obama then picks John Kerry instead, guess what happens in the United States Senate? Massachusetts suddenly has an open U.S. Senate seat, as well as a certain Republican senator from that state who is basically just sitting around doing nothing since he just lost his re-election effort. I know this sounds crazy. I'm fully aware of that fact, but that's kind of part of the point. And honestly, it is getting harder and harder to find a rational explanation for all of this Republican hand-wringing. It's been going on over something that Susan Rice said on a Sunday morning talk show 2.5 months ago. I mean, there are legit questions to ask about what happened during that attack on our consulate in Libya, what led up to that attack, right? Those questions deserve answers. They're being investigated. There also may be legitimate questions to ask about Susan Rice as a potential Secretary of State. But that's not what's going on. And there is this added dimension to what's going on right now that is really strange.
I just believe that she has actually disqualified herself to be Secretary of State. If the president wants an easy confirmation hearing and an easy confirmation process, what he would do is nominate John Kerry, who is eminently qualified to be Secretary of State, and I believe he would sail through in the nominating process.
I would need to have additional information before I could support her nomination. I think John Kerry would be an excellent appointment and would be easily confirmed by his colleagues.
It's like the same breath, right? Susan Rice disqualified. Because I need more information. I need a question answered or 7. Yeah, Susan Rice disqualified. John Kerry, now pick him. That's your guy. It was Republican Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine. In terms of the Republican attack dogs who are leading the charge against Susan Rice right now, I feel like I should point out, right, the ones who have been the most vocal and out front in recent days against Susan Rice have been Susan Collins, good old John McCain, and Kelly Ayotte of New Hampshire. Senator McCain and Senator Ayotte have both suggested that they would even put an individual hold on a potential Susan Rice nomination. Susan Collins is now out there saying that John Kerry would definitely be much better for that job. I think it is worth noting, now that we are already hip deep in this conspiracy theory of mine, that this trio of Republican senators have been united behind another cause in the really recent past. When Republican Senator Scott Brown was running for re-election in Massachusetts against Elizabeth Warren this past fall, he did pretty much everything in his power to convince the citizens of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that he wasn't really a Republican, that little R next to his name just stood for really nice guy. It doesn't stand for Republican, it stands for reformer, it stands for bipartisan.
Hey, listen, I'm the second most bipartisan in the United States Senate. I was recently named by Washingtonian magazine as the least partisan senator. We need to sit down in a room in a bipartisan manner. The only way we're going to get this done is to actually work together in a truly bipartisan manner.
Scott Brown ran as far as he possibly could from the Republican label during his Senate campaign. But there were a few select Republicans that Scott Brown would allow himself to be associated with in his campaign. There were just a handful of Republican senators Scott Brown was apparently so chummy with that he was willing to tote them around Massachusetts with him.
What an honor it is to be with you today. You know, I'm here because of my great friendship with my colleague, Senator Scott Brown.
Hello, Susan Collins. Susan Collins did a big bus tour with Scott Brown just a few days before Election Day. Scott Brown also campaigned alongside New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte. There she is outside of a Massachusetts deli shouting into a bullhorn that Scott Brown is holding. It might even be Mr. Brown's famous truck behind them. I can't quite tell. Okay, but Kelly Ayotte and Susan Collins are from sort of neighboring states, so maybe that makes sense. This guy's not from a neighboring state.
This thing is the one I want most in the United States Senate working side.
Scott Brown is the one I want most in the United States Senate. John McCain, Kelly Ayotte, Susan Collins were the 3 Republicans. They were pretty much the only 3 Republicans that Scott Brown deemed not too toxic to bring with him to Massachusetts during his campaign. And now that there is an inkling of a chance that a Senate seat might open up again in Massachusetts for Scott Brown to run for, guess who's doing all of the dirty work to make sure that Massachusetts Senate seat opens up? Ta-da! I know, it seems nuts. I fully admit that it seems nuts. But it makes a heck of a lot more sense than what John McCain is saying right now. It's the only thing that makes sense right now, given the really, 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 really incessantly hollow nature of all of these attacks against Susan Rice. Earlier this afternoon, the great and good Andrea Mitchell did some digging on this. She asked Senator Kelly Ayotte directly about this strange set of circumstances.
There's another suggestion that has been made that this is a Republican attempt to get her so wounded that John Kerry is nominated instead, which would then open up a vacancy and lead to a special election in Massachusetts that Scott Brown would then be teed up for. Is there an effort here that has to do with Senate politics, raw politics?
Absolutely absurd, Andrea. I would remind you, this is an issue I was pursuing and others long before the election, before we knew whether Scott Brown was going to win that election. So I think that claim is absurd.
Absurd? Or absolutely spot on? Something is up here. What they are saying they are doing here is so stupid as to not plausibly explain what they are doing. Something else explains what they are doing. I don't think we have quite gotten to the bottom of it yet, but something is up.